welcome to yet another exciting session of BYJU'S Social Science classes. Now, talking about exciting, we have a lot of exciting stuff happening for you. So before I actually start this exciting session, let me tell you some of these exciting things. So the first thing that I want to tell you is that we have ANTHE, which is basically stands for Aakash National Talent Hunt exam, and this is a very exciting exam for those of you who are aspiring to become doctors or engineers. The link is in your description box. I'm not going to use up too much time telling you all about it because we have lots of videos out there for you to know what it's all about and to know the benefits of signing up for this. So please, the link is in your description box. Register for it. It is absolutely free. All right. Then our next exciting piece of news is that midterm mania has started. We know that midterms are right around the corner, and we at BYJU'S as always want to support you, want to back you up with all the knowledge that you can get so that you can actually go and ace these midterm exams, right? So on our channel, we have a lot of exciting stuff for you. We've got a whole lot of revision questions. We've got strategy sessions. We've got one-shot marathons. We've got lots of stuff basically, okay? So we're going to support you in this journey. And by the way, for social science, I'm going to be putting up some shorts for you which will also help you to ace your exams and basically do well in social science. So please register to our channel, subscribe to our channel, and you will find that BYJU'S supports you through and through, right? Okay, now let us start with today's session. So today we will be starting with the first chapter of history for grade 10th. Now, I know that a lot of you have been really waiting for this particular chapter. In fact, every time during my live sessions, I keep getting requests saying, ma'am, please do this particular chapter. So it is a very long chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. By the way, it's one of my favorite chapters. What are we going to do today? Well, yes, we are going to study Rise of Nationalism in Europe. So let's get started. Now, first, let's talk about the learning objectives for this particular chapter. That is, we're going to be discussing what are the goals of this particular chapter. So, these goals are basically two. Number one, discuss the French Revolution and the idea of the nation. Number two, to discuss how nationalism emerged as a force during the 19th century Europe and brought political changes to that particular continent, namely Europe. And thirdly, we will be discussing other concepts such as aristocracy and liberalism. So these are the goals of our chapter. Okay, now, like I told you, this is a very long chapter. So let us take a look at how we will be proceeding with this particular lesson or this particular chapter. So I've got 4 subtopics for you over here. Now, the subtopics that we will be covering in the first segment of the chapter are as follows. We will be discussing these questions across 2 sessions, okay? And there's more I'm going to tell you that about. I'm going to be telling you. See, basically, this is the first segment. Now, this first segment will be done in terms of 2 sessions. And then after that, because this is a really long chapter, you know that we cannot possibly have only this much in that chapter. We have to go ahead and discuss a lot more. So this chapter entirely is going to be done in a total of 4 sessions. So right now, I'm giving you the roadmap of the first 2 sessions. So we will be asking ourselves some questions. We will be asking ourselves, number one, what was the context behind the rise of nationalism in Europe? As in, what was the background at that point in time? Then we will go ahead and discuss that why did the revolution become such a necessity at this time? Then we will go ahead and discuss who were the key people involved in bringing about the idea of nationalism, and we will then go ahead and discuss what were the key milestones in the revolution. Once again, these 4 subtopics will be covered in 2 sessions, but this total chapter will take us 4 sessions, right? Again, we will be going through all of these questions in detail, and in answering each of them, by the end of the 4 sessions, you will actually understand and you will find that all our learning objectives have been covered. So shall we get started? Well then, let's do that. Let's start with our first question, which is, what was the context behind the rise of nationalism, or what was the background? Now, in order to understand the context, let's do one thing. Let's take a look at the map of Europe. So, if you take a look at this is the present day map of Europe. But do you know that the map of Europe did not always look like this? What did it look like? Well, take a look at this map over here. This was the map of mid-19th century Europe, right? So this was Europe in 1815 specifically. Now, can you tell me the differences that you can make out between the current map of Europe, which is this one that I showed you, and this one? What's the difference? Well, as we can see in this one, we had many countries like Germany, Italy, Switzerland, etc. that we know of today, but they did not exist back at that point in time. So isn't that quite surprising? So what did we have in place of this? Well, instead of the countries as we know them today, we had a group of kingdoms. They were basically called duchies and cantons, right? And these were ruled by autocratic monarchies. And then we had Eastern and Central Europe, which was also basically under autocratic monarchies. And all these kingdoms had a very diverse set of people, very, very different people in all of them, right? So what exactly was the problem? What was the background, like I said? Now, the problem over here with this was that the people in all these kingdoms, they did not necessarily see themselves as sharing a common identity or a common culture, or in fact even a common language, right? Like, for example, today as Indians, we know that we have a shared identity or a shared culture, or we consider ourselves Indians, right? So this was not the case at that time. Let me explain this to an example, okay? Now, take a look at this map over here. This is a map of the Habsburg Empire in 1848. Now, this was ruled over, this Habsburg Empire, basically they ruled over Austria-Hungary. Now, these people, as in this empire, consisted of many different religions, different groups of people. They had, it covered many different regions. So, for example, in terms of diversity, just to explain to you, you had the Alpine regions of the empire, which consisted of Tyrol and Austria. You had the Sudetenland, you had Bohemia, all of that. Here, you had the aristocracy, which basically spoke German. Now just take a look at this as I keep explaining, okay? Then you had the regions of Lombardy and Venetia, which consisted of Italian-speaking people, right? Then Magyar was the language that was spoken by half of the population, and the rest of the population spoke in different dialects. Then you had the Polish language, which was basically the language of choice in the aristocracy of Galicia. And besides these major groups, there were also other people who were mainly peasants living in this Habsburg Empire, who had different ethnicities. So, for example, you had the Bohemians and the Slovaks in the north. You had the Slovenes in Carniola. You had the Croats in the south, and then you had the Romans to the east in Transylvania. So, can you imagine that? So many different type of people, so many different ethnicities. So, obviously here, what we have to understand is that forging a common political unity with so many different groups of people that are involved would have been almost impossible, right? So, what was the common thing for these people? Was there anything in common? Well, the only thing bringing all these different people together was the monarchy and its strict controlling authoritarian hand. So basically, what was the problem? The problem was that all these different people were not happy with the monarchy and they wanted to overthrow the monarchy, and that was the common factor between them. Alright, so that was our background. Alright, now that we have established the context and understood the background, let's look into our second question. That is, why did the revolution become a necessity? But before that, we must understand that in order to overturn a system that has existed for centuries, right? So in this case, for example, autocratic monarchies, we would need much more than just armies and firepower. Over and above that, we would need ideas that are capable of overthrowing the existing worldview. And that idea in this case was nationalism. So, what exactly is nationalism? Well, nationalism is an idea of forming a nation state where the majority of its citizens share common culture and a sense of collective identity. And interestingly, the first expression of nationalism can be seen during the French Revolution of 1789. Now, I have a very interesting question for you. Can you tell me which famous event led to the French Revolution? And if you know the answer, please let me know in the comment section below. I will be waiting for them. Now, coming back. Do you know why the French Revolution took place? Okay, let me tell you. So in France, the Bourbon dynasty had been in power for centuries, like a really long time, right? But what was happening here was that the nation, that is France, was getting progressively poorer. But the Bourbon dynasty or the monarchy did nothing to alleviate the pain of the people. So eventually you had a strong surge of nationalism which led to the French Revolution, which eventually disposed of the monarchy. And post the French Revolution, the power shifted from the monarchy to the body of citizens. So it basically moved from the monarchy to the people, right? And the good news is that the revolution proclaimed that now people will decide the destiny of France, not the monarchy anymore. So also I want to tell you that the French from the very outset or the beginning, they tried to engage in exercises that created a sense of collective identity. So in this case, the French ideals of la patria, meaning the fatherland, and la citoyen, or the citizen, they became very important as they focused on the idea of a united France enjoying equal rights under the French Constitution. Even a new flag was chosen. You had the tricolor which came in to replace the old royal standard. And not just that, you had a lot of changes that took place even at the administrative level. So what were these changes? So we had the Estates General, which was the body of elected citizens, which was renamed as the National Assembly. Right? I'm just going to put that down for you over here. National Assembly. This was one of the changes. Also, we had a centralized administrative system which was put into place, which created uniform laws for all French citizens. Then you had internal custom duties and dues which were abolished and done away with. And in place, you had a uniform system of weights and measures. Apart from this, you had new hymns and oaths were composed and martyrs were commemorated. Right? And then apart from this, you had regional dialects that were discouraged, and French, the way that it is spoken now and written in Paris, was taken up as the common language. So if you get a question that asks you, how did French contribute to the sense of, how did France contribute to the sense of collective identity? Well, these were the points that you can mention in your question, in your answer. All right? Okay, let's move ahead. So, we see that in France, the growth of nationalism was underway. However, this idea of nationalism also made its way to territories outside France. Do you know how this was accomplished? Well, this was done through the Jacobin clubs. So let's understand what these Jacobin clubs were. Jacobin clubs were basically set up by students and members of the middle class. And these were the people that were influenced by the French ideals in different cities of Europe. They were the ones who spread these ideals in the countries of Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and quite a lot of Italy. And this essentially paved the way for French armies to enter these areas later in the 1790s. Okay, so till now, we saw how the French Revolution became the starting point of nationalism in Europe. And we also understood how it spread the idea to other parts of Europe. Now the question is, why did people from the other parts of Europe support this nationalism? Can you tell me the answer? Well, the main goal of nationalism was to bring down one thing in particular. Do you know what that is? Well, the goal of nationalism was to bring down the aristocracy. So what is the aristocracy? Well, the aristocracy or the aristocrats were basically the highest class in the societal hierarchy at that point in time. They typically composed of people of noble birth, and sometimes they held hereditary titles and offices. Now, let us see how this aristocracy affected France and Europe. I mean, what was the problem, right? So basically, the landed aristocracy was the dominant class in Europe. Okay, I'm putting them over here. Dominant means they were the, they were controlling everything. So they basically owned huge estates, they had lavish mansions, and they spoke in French. And in fact, they even married amongst themselves so as not to dilute their power. So even though actually these aristocrats were just a small fraction of the population, they actually held a lot of power, right? They held a lot of power. So there was obviously a very huge divide. They controlled the socio-political institutions and they controlled the majority of the population, who were basically the peasants at that point in time. So there you have the aristocrats and you have the peasants, and such a big divide. And obviously because they're so dominating and controlling, the peasants would have a problem. The majority of the people would have a problem with the aristocrats. Now, I spoke about the aristocracy and the peasants. But this divide between the aristocrats and the peasants, just these two divides, basically did not remain for too long, because we had industrialization that began taking place in England in the second half of the 18th century. And you also had industrialization which was happening in parts of France and in the German states during the 19th century. And with this advent of industrialization, there arose a new class of people who were educated and had a liberal mindset. Right? So you see, this is the new class. So this came in between the peasants and the aristocrats. These people were the budding middle class. And this consisted of many industrialists, businessmen, professionals. All of them were a part of this middle class. And because of these people, you had the idea of liberalism that emerged in Europe. Now, what does the term liberalism mean? The term liberalism derives from the Latin root liber. Can you tell me what liber means? Let me know your answers in the comment section below. I think it's pretty obvious what it means. Put your answers below. I am waiting for them. Okay. Now let us discuss. What exactly is liberalism? Well, liberalism is a political ideology that focuses on people's personal freedom, civil liberties, and democracy. And in economic terms also, liberalism advocates free trade and enterprise. So isn't that good? So let us now see how this new belief of liberalism started to get a hold of the people in Europe. Well, understand this. Liberalism, since the end of the French Revolution, meant the end of the autocratic rule and clerical privileges, right? So they basically wanted to do away with the monarchy. It also meant setting up of a constitution, right? And a representative government with a parliament. So let me just put over here, representative government, right? This is what liberalism meant. But you know, it's not just this. The liberals in the 19th century also emphasized the complete security of private property so that what is yours can stay yours, right? Now, this is all very good. But there were a few shortcomings with the ideas of liberalism as well. So can you tell me what the shortcomings were, or what the problems with this form of liberalism was? Well, liberalism did promote equality, but as we will see, it promoted equality only up to a certain degree. Let's understand. Now, equality under the eyes of the law, equality as we know it, at that time did not necessarily stand for the universal right to vote, which we know as suffrage. So, please note this, that under the rule of the Jacobins, only all men were allowed to vote, which means women were not allowed to vote at that particular time. And then after the revolution, things actually got worse in this aspect. So after you had the Civil Code of 1804, which was also known as the Napoleonic Code, after that came into effect, you could have only men who owned property, they could vote. So now it was not even all men. It was just the people who had property, and women definitely were not allowed to vote, right? So like I said, men without access to property and all women were not allowed to vote. And does that mean equality? Obviously, this is not equal, right? And in fact, women had to suffer a lot of discrimination. They were reduced to the status of just a minor. What does that mean? This means that women had to be subjected to the authority of their fathers and their husbands. So obviously, we know that this is equality only to a certain measure. It's not complete equality, right? This is injustice. So as a response to this injustice, all through the 19th and the early 20th centuries, you had women and you had non-propertied men who started movements demanding equal political rights, right? Now, this was a bad thing, definitely. Things had to become more equal. But liberalism had its uses in the economic sphere of Europe. You know, it was actually good for it because in terms of the economic sphere, it guaranteed freedom of markets and the removal of state-imposed restrictions on goods and capital. Okay, let me understand this with let me explain this by giving you an example. So, we know that Napoleon had conquered large swaths of German-speaking areas in the first half of the 19th century and had turned them into a confederation of 39 states. Right? However, the problem was that each of these 39 states had its own currencies, its own weights and its own measurements. So, can you just imagine the plight of a German merchant having to do business with these different states if he has to travel from one place to the other to do business? For example, you had a measure of cloth which was known as the L. Okay. Now, the problem over here was that in each region, the L actually stood for completely different lengths. Can you imagine that? So, if a person is going to sell a piece of cloth in one area, an L means something else, and then going to another area and it means something completely else. It's completely different, right? So, there's chaos, right? Because with every state having different currencies, different weights and different measurements, business obviously would be almost impossible to conduct. So, talking about Napoleon, I must say that Napoleon did definitely bring about some good changes during his reign, which we will discuss in our next session. However, these changes did not last long because things went back to the same situation in the economic sphere after his defeat. So, in 1834, you had a customs union or a Zollverein. Let me put this down for you. Let me spell it also. Z-O-L-L-V-E-R-E-I-N. This means custom unit. customs union. So we had the Zollverein, or the customs union, which was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. So what did the Zollverein do? It abolished all these different currencies for each state, and it removed tariff barriers so that business was now much easier to conduct, right? Okay, and this was one of the effects of liberalism. Now, I think it's time that we wind up our session for today. So, before winding up the session, let's have a quick recap of what exactly we've learned today. So, number one, we looked at how nationalism emerged as a force that brought about sweeping changes in Europe. We understood the context, right, behind the rise of nationalism. We understood the situation. We also went ahead and looked at why the revolution became a necessity in the social political context of Europe at that point in time. We also went ahead and we studied various ideologies such as aristocracy and liberalism. Should I put that down for you over here? Aristocracy and liberalism. Yes, we have covered quite a lot, so you may want to go back and view the session again to catch the smaller things that we've studied, right? Now, before I end the session, I have a question for you. Tell me, do you know who was the last king of France before the fall of the monarchy during the French Revolution? Who was the last king of France during the French Revolution? Let me know your answers in the comment section below. And like I said, it's time to wind up this session. We're going to have the next session, which will cover the next 2 points for you in our next session, basically. So I'm going to see you really soon. But listen, before I go, exciting news again. We started with exciting news and we're ending with exciting news. What was the exciting news in the beginning? We spoke about ANTHE and we spoke about midterm mission. Alright, now I want to tell you that we spoke about midterm mission giving you support, right, during your exams. I want to tell you that in this last year, we are so happy to say that we have had so many students that have felt actually supported and have benefited from the sessions that we take over here. We have Trisha Biswal, who is our very own BYJU'S student. She is a BYJU'S premium student, as well as attended a lot of the sessions that we did and followed our channels. So I want to tell you that she has done such an amazing job in her exam. She has scored 99.8% and has got almost full marks in all her subjects. And she's actually, there's an interview that has been done with her. So please go ahead and watch that interview, because you will know that BYJU'S loves its students and we really support you no matter what, right? In fact, talking about data and results, let me tell you that it's been so exciting for us to know, after collecting the data, that we have seen that 23 of our students have scored above 99. We have 927 of our students that have got between 95 to 99%. We have 1,663 students that have got between 90 to 95 and 2,600 plus students that have got above 90%, and we are so excited to have been a part of this journey. So please subscribe to our channel, download the BYJU'S Learning app and become a premium student, and you will find that both these platforms together will really help you to ace your exams, score very well. Right? Now, my news is not over yet. I want to give you another exciting piece of news, which is that the BYJU'S mini learning program is now free for the first 1,000 users every week. So isn't that great? All you need to do is click on the link and put in the code YT first, all right, and you can avail of this program absolutely free. So you see, we're always with you, students. Make use of this opportunity. And hey, I have another piece of news for you. We have been told, let me tell you, that this particular date, 14th August 2022, we have to really watch out for this date. We've been told, even I don't know why, but we've been told that this date can change your life. And I'm very excited. But like I said, I don't know anything about this. I have just been told to wait for this date also. So I'm telling you the same thing. We will get to know more about this in an announcement on 7th August. So block your diaries, stay tuned and watch how this date can change your life, because we know that if BYJU'S is doing it, it will definitely be a positive change, right? And that's it from me today. For more such sessions, please go ahead, tune into our channel, 910 channel, and definitely do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. I'm going to see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.